welcome to Bollywood Bubble. And how are you doing? How's everything going with you?
Yeah, absolutely fine. I'm as good as what one can expect in the COVID times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So jumping straight right, and your upcoming film 12 o'clock, it's about to release on the 18th. It's a theatrical release. So I would want you to tell us that what the film is about, and is it something that you're trying to say through this film, or you wish to say through this film, or is it Ramu sir having fun in the Toy Story yet again this time?
That's a good question. See, I would say, I'm not a believer in supernatural or anything to do with ghosts and spirits and all that, personally. But having said that, I feel it's a question of if you experience something in your real life, only then you can talk about it. But if you don't experience, you can also be in your own sphere where you have this ego that only what you know exists in the world, exists in life, So 12 o'clock basically is about professionals like the police department, the medical community. They come across a certain uniquely different strange phenomena which they can't explain with rational logic. So if it's something like that happens, how can they do it? Because a policeman by definition cannot tell somebody that I'm dealing with a spirit. Because officially no one is going to allow that kind of a submission to happen. And same thing goes for psychiatrists. So I just created this uniquely strange situation happening right in the middle of Bombay City. And the drama happens from there. Yeah.
And this film has an array of talented artists and established artists like Mithun sir, Makaran sir, Manav sir, and of course Ashish Vidyarthi sir also.
Yeah.
So while working with some of such fine talents of our cinema, were there any creative differences between them and you? Who's known for artistic sensibilities that doesn't fit into the mold that this world functions in?
Creative differences, I don't know. I think filmmaking eventually is a very collaborative effort. And discussions will happen, and sometimes an actor or a technician might suggest to me or might say that something else will work better, something else will be more effective. And there are times when I will probably agree to that. And there are times I probably will explain why I don't think it works. Eventually, as a director, I'll prevail, but that's the job of a director because it's going on my name. But of course, the interactions I welcome a lot. In fact, many times I ask the actor if he or she is going to tell me something different from what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
And moving further, you weaponized cameras as a crucial aspect of storytelling in our Hindi mainstream space. And as far as my understanding and memory go, you're the first filmmaker in Hindi cinema who kind of left behind the chapter of textbook shots and opened up a new leaf where camera started getting used more creatively in our films. If you could revisit the old times and tell us that what was that one film that made you realize that camera is something that hasn't been explored much in our films.
See, I've been like the kind of directors who influenced me in my very early days, even before I became a director, like Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock, and there are quite a few Hollywood directors who use the camera very innovatively. Conventionally it is always covering what's happening, but becoming an integral part of storytelling, a slight movement to, in terms of the movement of the camera, also becoming a character by its own, apart from the other actors. I think that said, I would not say that I invented it. I think I largely studied that from Hollywood cinema, I would say. And probably I am the first kid to use it in India, but that is more from copying it from the West and not created by me. Yeah.
And you're known for making highly experimental films, and changing the rules of the games. For like with Satya, you introduced Mumbai Noir to the dictionary of Hindi films. A genre which consists of gritty realism and brutal and urban violence. Which looks tasteful on screen. But however, by being highly experimental, one also tends to alienate from the very ground where the game is set. So, does the absence of a certain commercial checks in your films, does it act as a double-edged sword? Because on one hand, it may give you a high degree of experimentation, but at the same time, it takes your work too far off from the audience in general. So is this something that you would agree to?
I honestly believe a true filmmaker will never really think so much about the audience because it is his urge, it is his passion of telling a story in the way he wishes to say. And hopefully there'll be enough of the audience who will kind of support that. That is a factor depending upon the budgets and the costs and what kind of audience you're making for. So if you're trying to make for someone you don't connect to, that will be a bigger risk in my opinion, and that is a bigger experiment actually if I do it. And I think I can only do what I think I'm best at, and not what I think people know. Because people, you cannot generalize them. They're not like a herd. Everyone has a different taste and sensibility. So I think, even in my first film, Shiva, at that point of time, if I really thought of the audience, I couldn't have made it in that way. I mean, good, bad is not the point. That is a function of what the people will say once it releases. But when I am making, I only can do what excites me. Yeah, and I never look at it neither as I'm not conscious that I'm making an experimental film. I just wish to tell the story that way. So when I made Satya, I never thought it was an experimental film. I thought I was capturing the people in the slums at that time. In the heavy underworld activity was going on in 97, 98. I just wanted to capture them the way they are. And I never thought either of the success or people will like it or people will not connect to the style. Because I remember someone told me the people were always watching gangsters like in Diwar and, they're very stylized, they're very moving luxury cars and all that. I said, see, cinema is a fantasy world. It can be in any way. But I want people to feel the guy walking on the road can be a gangster. Because they just kind of mix up in the entire thing and they don't stand out. Which is one way of telling the story. Yeah.
Okay. And since we mentioned Satya, I would want to know that what was the energy of the whole crew like, back when the film was being shot? Because, we all were in a very new space with, fresh talents on the block. And so, what was that one thing that kept them going? What was the motivation that drew the entire crew?
See, one is we were living right in the middle of the most serious underworld activity happening just after Gulshan Kumar was killed. And then a spate of assassination happened in the time period of 97 to 98. So I think my very initial thing was just like a realistic action film, like a Shiva to an extent. But when every day I'm hearing things about what's happening, I thought the inherent drama is so much. If you underplay it and make them as human as you can, I think the message will be driven more strongly. And with regard to all of us, it's not that none of us imagine that we're making a cult film. I always believe that films become great by themselves. No one can make it. If I know how to make a great film, why will I make flops?
Yeah.
You only can make a film, whether it becomes great or not. I think I kind of compare this to you can give birth to a child, but what the child will become, I think is not really in your hands. Multiple factors would influence that, But we were true to what we were making. And I don't remember any of us in the unit discussing whether this kind of a film will be seen, and people like it. We were just so, what do you call it? But even before the release, even before the release, when people actually watched it, and they were having... a lot of them liked it in the previews a lot, but all of them had a doubt whether this will be seen by the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Satya's score is one of the most iconic scores of our cinema. I mean, if I remember correctly, if I'm correctly informed, it's one of the rare background scores that was distributed on the cassettes. So I would want to know what was the jamming between you and Sandeep Chota like? I mean, were you very clear from the start as to what Satya would sound like, or was it that he kept bouncing off the tracks?
When I basically announced the making of Satya, one make a realistic underworld film. In fact, he was a very close friend of Nagarjuna. I happened to meet him at Nagarjuna's place the first time, and he said, "I heard that you're doing this." And just on a gut level, I made a theme, what I thought will suit the film. And he made me listen to the theme. Actually, that was even before the shooting started. And the moment I heard it, I know this is the right kind of music, and that's how it came into the film.
And you and Anurag Kashyap, you have been great friends, and but you also share this love-hate kind of relationship. And you mentioned that his thinking and yours, they are truly polar opposite, be it thinking or the filmmaking sensibilities. But in a film, which is a collaborative art form, as you mentioned, when two such people come together who come from a very different space, in terms of wavelength and worldview, how do the two of you then create something so spectacular in the form of Shul, Satya, or Kaun? How did that happen?
See, the functions are different. Technically, Anurag was a new person. He just came in, and I was there for quite some time as a filmmaker. So I think where Anurag's strengths were, I kind of used it there. See, for example, that Ramo Sham dialogue, the joke, just before the shootout happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene when Bikul Matre says, "Yad hai uske liye goli khaya tha main," just before you're killing Guru Narayan. Those lines are very typical of Anurag, which is not what really my thing is. But I know that will work in that space. Because I am generally a very stylized and very design-oriented director. I compose a dialogue for the shot, sometimes a shot for the dialogue, which is not what really. There are quite substantial scenes in Satya shot like that. But wherever I know Anurag kind of writing will work for the character, I kept that there. And so to that extent, because the Satya was not really following a very specific pattern of design, it worked. But for example, a guy like Anurag will never work. His kind of lines will never work in Sarkar, just to give an example, probably even in company. So I think the secret is to use the particular worth of the person in the context of where it will work and which film it can work. Yeah.
And in your own words, you strive to amuse, entertain, and irritate. Now, these are the things that they find their value in stirring up what's at rest. So, to entertain, to amuse, or to irritate, one needs to work against the inertia and sustain the momentum. So considering that, would it be right to say that you have a certain penchant for chaos, and is this something that we'll see in 12 o'clock also?
See, definitely I would say anything normal bores me. Anything which is appeal for kind of a popular appeal doesn't interest me. I want to provoke. I want to just kind of shatter the belief system of what people accept as conventional. Coming to 12 o'clock, I think strange is an opposite of what I'm saying, because I personally do not believe in supernatural or ghosts. Mm-hmm. But what if a guy who's not a believer experiences something which is not possible for him to rationally understand? Mm-hmm. What does he do then? So this is about a young girl who claims that she's behind a spate of serial killings happening in the city, mm-hmm. which is an impossible thing for anyone to understand. But now in the police and the medical fraternity, the psychiatric team, when they actually see, they have no choice but to kind of accept it could be the truth, that there's someone inside her, So when no matter what the rational mind says, your experience completely demolishes it, what is the choice you have, So in fact, the film opens with a line, unless you experience it, you will never understand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all this is happening in the hustle bustle of Mumbai city is the point. It's not happening in a kind of a, what do you call, a hill on a haunted house on a hill or in the graveyard or whatever is happening in the traffic. Yeah.
And since you mentioned that, anything that is normal, it kind of bores you. So you always strive to, stir things up in your personal capacity or in creative capacity also.
Yeah.
Also, as a filmmaker, you don't follow the set rules of filmmaking, as we have seen with your work. So would you call yourself an on-screen anarchist in that way? Something that goes beyond and disrupts completely what's there already.
See, the point is, I'm a person who gets bored very fast, and I want things to happen constantly, something or other to excite my interest and excite my I just love to live every second of my life in a kind of excitement. So I think that kind of a mindset automatically translates back to my work also, in the way like a lot of people ask me now, the camera angles, they seem weird. Some people say think they're weird, my way of photography or whatever, but that is a way I wish to see life. I don't want an eye level vision of what I normally every day see, you know. So that is, it's all about being individualistic, but not for the sake of it, but that is truly what I genuinely feel, how I want to see it. Yeah.
And you have said this, that you don't get emotionally involved in whatever work you do, and this is evident from the replica of iguana and the dog replica in your office. But then filmmaking, or any art form for that matter, it germinates from a very personal space. That personal space which is a breeding ground of emotions. What good a film or a story or character without any emotions? So how do you manage to make a film without getting emotionally invested in it? How do you make this a rather mechanical process?
I honestly think from what you're talking about, the more emotionally detached you are, I think you can catch them better. The reason being, like for example, I'm giving an example from Satya. Though it's a conflict-oriented story between Bau to Bikumatre to Sai, everyone, all of them look right in their own perspective. When after killing Bikumatre, Bau said, "Ita sa itna sara." I bloody brought him up and he dared to challenge me, which is completely justifying why Bau wants to kill him or kill him. Okay, so I, being a neutral person, I'm able to look at everyone without taking sides to it, which is what I mean by emotional detachment. So I'm actually studying it like a historian. I'm trying to document and understand the aspects of what happened without myself getting involved emotionally in the process. Because the moment you do that, you tend to take sides, and then I think the story loses its value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned detachment, I would like to know from you that you like to be very much detached from the world and from yourself also. You have mentioned this quite a few times. So, does this sense of detachment or nihilism, up to a certain degree, does this come from Friedrich Nietzsche, whose work has had a greater influence on your life?
I wouldn't say from him alone, but definitely he was an influence. The interesting thing is, all philosophers are very emotional people, though the writings don't appear to be. I would think a variety of writers, including Nietzsche, but I wouldn't say just him. Ayn Rand also has been a huge influence on me. And a lot of fiction writers also are a huge influence on me. Yeah, like Frederick Forster, for example. Yeah.
And moving further, what's the reason behind your fascination with working fresh talents? Is it something that gives you a greater degree of freedom to push the boundaries in your narratives?
See, main thing why that happens is I would put it across this way. When, for example, in Sarkar, there's a scene when Rashid comes and gives a warning to Mr. Bachchan. I thought a guy who never seen before walking with that kind of a confidence and will create a fear rather than if I see an actor who is known to come there. Okay. Now, even in a movie like Satya, for example, the people, because you do not know them well, and they look authentic considering the kind of locations I shot in. But if I take established actors and put them there, and for a second, if I say there's a Shah Rukh and Salman in Bikumatre and Satya's role, I don't think the film will remain the same. It might work, maybe better than Satya, but for reasons other than why it worked. That will work on a star-driven concept because people come to see them. Here, when you're trying to, you need to be clear about the purpose of why you're making a film. So, in the context of that, most of my casting decisions are based on that.
And every filmmaker has this thing that they tend to put few hints of their earlier works also in their upcoming works or their new releases. So will we get to see something of that sort in 12 o'clock, or is it something completely fresh that we'll get to see on screen?
I mean, I honestly, I don't know the subject matter by itself. Like, for example, the phenomenon of possession is something even I have done in hundreds of films I've been done. But in the context of the kind of a family, I put in the story lower middle class, where the father is a peon, an educated guy, and his daughter creating that thing, which almost shakes up the establishment of the medical community. And shot in the ambience of the hustle bustle of a city, I think will create a very uniquely different visual experience.
And you mentioned this thing that you are not a believer of supernatural power or something like that. And then you also have said this that you do not know that why your films are successful and why they don't work. So does does this thrill of not knowing few things, does this excite you as a person and as a filmmaker also in your personal capacity?
I'll give an example. I'm not very sure I remember the name right. There's this tarot card reader who was quite popular in Bollywood around 10 years back. I forgot the name. She starts with S. She's very close to Ekta Kapoor at that time. So one day she offered to tell me my future, and I said I don't want to know it, because for two reasons. One is, if it's bad news, I don't want to know, because anyway, but the whole point is my future. I can't escape it.
Yeah.
I can only know. If you can escape the point, then it is not future anyway. Yeah, so I said, and I want to be excited to wake up the next morning and to see what life has stored in it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I want to have that excitement. By knowing it beforehand, it's like knowing the climax of the film before you saw it. So that is my answer to your question.
So you like to live life spoiler free?
Yes, yeah. I just live it by the moment, yeah.
Okay. And lastly, how would you describe the soundtrack or the sound of 12 o'clock?
See, M.M. Kirwani has done the music for it. I think it's the first time he's done the Bahubali music director. For the first time he's done a horror film. And he did it very, very differently from how I normally treat scores, which is the reason I wanted a uniquely different kind of a mind to work on this. And then, of course, horror films, one of the mainstay is sound effects, because sound is a natural process. But in a heightened state of mental, they tend to exaggerate, not necessarily by the level of volume, but also by the presence of it. Like a sound of a table fan can create a certain kind of an ambience, which you normally take it for granted if the same sound was used in a dramatic film or a rom-com or any other genre. But in a horror film, every sound seems to take a life of its own, which I've used quite a lot in 12 o'clock.
So with that, we have reached the end of this conversation. I would like to know if there's some question that I may have missed asking, or something that you would have loved to answer or talk about. So please feel free to talk about it.
Yeah, I think pretty much, I feel in theatrical films in the post-COVID and all that, very few genres, I think, like spectacles or CG and action-oriented, and horror film, I think we watch in a darkened theatre, because unlike in a living room where you tend to put the lights on and watch any film, I think to that extent, 12 o'clock might be a very unique experience.
And given the whole social distancing in place, it would turn out to be even a better experience.
Yeah. Thanks.
So on that note, thank you so much for talking to us, Ramu. So it was a pleasure and an honor being in your company. Please take care and
Thank you.
Have a great time. Bye-bye.
Take care.